gig economy, the millennials. It's driven by the millennials, by the startups. And there's, of course, the cultural issues that come along that, where you're trying to marry an aging workforce and the millennials with their new tech tools, whether it be a Siri or a Alexa or Google Home, and those kind of mobile technologies. Uh, the second kind of sub-theme would be the future of payments. I think if you remember that in 1994, Bill Gates said that banking may remain, but banks may not. Of course, we are seeing a lot of that kind of stuff happening with mobile wallets. We are seeing a lot of cryptocurrencies, whether you talk about the most popular one, which is Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, but there are, of course, more than 1,500 cryptocurrencies. Some governments are in favor of them, some governments are not. But of course, the underlying technology of cryptocurrencies, which is blockchain, that is what is gaining a lot of traction. Of course, most of them are permissioned blockchains at this point in time, with the exception of, say, a Bitcoin or Ethereum, for that matter of fact. The third part would be future of cities. Now, of course, there's a lot of talk about 5G by 2020. And we clearly are going to see a lot of that stuff happening. These are kind of the, it's in its infancy sort of, which I think Dimitra and all will be speaking a lot more about. And coupled with that, we have the whole trend of the Internet of Things, the connectedness of devices, some 50 billion devices by 2020. Now, that's a humongous thing. But when you couple IoT with AI, IoT with blockchain for more security, etc., then you get a very formidable kind of package. How is that going to translate into a new world is something that we need to see and something that we are going to discuss. We are going to talk about slightly about the future of manufacturing, whether you're going to talk about Industry 4.0, 3D printing, which of course we are going to say about how it's going to change the face of manufacturing. A lot of discussion has been happening around that. The future of transportation, whether we're talking about drone deliveries, electric cars. I think many in this room would already know that there's a Formula E electric car which races at about 290 kilometers per hour. So that's pretty good. You have hyperloops, you have air taxis. But of course, in future of cities, of course, you have the smart cities, the smart grids, and that whole thing is going to be discussed out here. There are, of course, clearly a lot of challenges, which is going to be the second part of the discussion when you're talking about interoperability of standards in IoT, security, which is whether it's malware, whether it's cryptojacking, etc. The increasing balkanization of the internet, because as we are talking about the internet connectedness of things, we're also having the balkanization of the internet happening simultaneously because of geopolitics. And since we are speaking a lot about all these trends being driven by the humongous amount of data and sophisticated algorithms which can be trained on the data, we have to take cognizance when we talk about the challenges of dirty data, that most of the data is probably unusable and which is causing a lot of problems out there. And of course, there are the policy issues which the earlier panel was discussing about, whether it's a GDPR, whether in India it was our own Aadhaar, the kind of debate that we had over the Aadhaar part of it, since India is yet to get its data privacy laws and its data protection laws. So just to wee bit introduce our panelists, to my immediate left, I have Julian David, who's the CEO of Tech UK. I have Professor Matt Jones. He's the head of College of Science, Swansea University. We have Professor Dimitra Simendiou, Director of Smart Internet Lab, Bristol University. And Suket Singhal.
Remaining in for this session, please. It will be televised, so we'd like to be able to see the panelists rather than the back of people's heads.
Two, 3 minutes to speak about how they look at the big picture from their worldview. Julian.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Tech UK is It's the big issue that I think all companies face, something we're exploring even today at Tech UK. The second thing I'd like to just highlight is disruption. We disrupt things, and we see that as a great thing. Disruption is a good thing, isn't it? Everything's going to be new, everything's going to be better. Well, it's not quite so good when you are the person being disrupted, and that needs to be thought through. There's a whole business around reskilling, retraining, dealing with the impacts of disruption. It doesn't land, with a trowel across everything. It hits particular focus groups, locations, or whatever. And that brings me to my last point for consideration, which is democracy. And that is all about how do you, in the context of this ubiquity, in the context of all these things we've been exploring, how do you ensure that societies and communities feel empowered and are empowered to actually benefit from these technologies? Obviously, democracy implies diversity, and that's very important when you construct and design things. The more and more of these things are built into algorithms, machine learning. Who designed the algorithm? Was it a diverse set of people? Were there diverse objectives? So those are the four topics I'd like to leave you with: data, disruption, democracy, diversity. Leslie.
Thank you, Julian. I think you hit the nail on the head by raising a very important point of ethics in AI, the whole explainable part of it, which I think DARPA itself has been doing and other companies. And I think we'll be speaking more about that in the challenges part of it. Matt, over to you.
Thank you very much. So I'm Matt Jones, and I'm from the Computational Foundry. It's a huge Welsh Government and EU investment into new ways of thinking about the future of digital. Can I just ask you to raise your hand if you're excited about the digital future? And I'll put my glasses on so I can see. Yeah, most of us are absolutely excited about this. But let me tell you, there really is a darkness descending on the digital. And our research groups are concerned and are working on, I guess, 3 topics. First of all, the robots are coming. You've probably heard and seen in the press, on TV, people are really worried about the future of automation. They're worried about what artificial intelligence will do to the precious smallness of everyday human life. In a world of the Internet of Things, people are concerned about, well, we're not things. We are embodied intelligences. So we need to sort that out. The second point that I'd like to raise is the robots are already here. So it's too late. And those robots are not the robots that I guess you're picturing in your head right now. Those kind of sleek, seductive bits of technology that work in factories, that whiz around Amazon. I've got some bad news for you all. The robots are you. Now, I put my glasses back on, and while I'm speaking, and probably for the rest of the session, many of us will have our heads down on this device, and we will be robotically clicking and touching and swiping. We are becoming automated, trained to provide data to the machine. The robots are already here, and we need to sort that out. And the last point is, it picks up on your point, Julian, what about the rest of the world? So if you flip your mobile phone round, those of you who've got an iPhone, you'll see the words, designed in California. You might then also see the word, assembled in China. And then we're all holding the devices. There is one dominant mindset for digital disruption, and it is the Californian mindset. And before we all start touching and thinking about America, we are all Californian. And so the last point that I would like to put into your heads is, how do we get increasingly other, fresher, diverser, new perspectives? And in our group, in our teams, we've had the great privilege in working across India for the last 15 years, up in Missouri, down in Gujarat, in Delhi, Bangalore, with rural and urban communities, not to solve problems, but to get the fascinatingly new disruptive perspectives on the digital.
Thank you, Matt. I think you made some very valid points on the whole part of how robots are us, rather than talking about the bicentennial man or sentient AI in the form of Skynet, which are the more scaremongering part of it. And we'll come more to this in the challenges part of it. Dimitra?
Right. I come from a very great city in the UK called Bristol. And I have been involved for a number of years now on a number of smart city projects, and more lately including actually incorporation of 5G technology to deliver urban services. So in these 2 minutes, I would like really to talk about urbanization and the challenges, technology challenges, to deliver the cities of the future. So statistics are dazzling. If you see back in 1960s, and I know I go quite long back with 1960s, there was about 30% of the global world population living in cities. Now it's 60% of the world population living in cities, and it's projected that by 2030, for the developed world, more than 80% of the populations are going to live in cities. So cities are great places to live. That's why most of us, we actually choose to live there. And it's not surprising that technology would actually play increasingly a bigger role in delivering smart cities and smart city services. And there is a lot of talk about smart cities. And actually smart is going to define how we live, how we work, and how we play in the cities. But if you look at the definition of smart right now, it's really about efficiency and productivity. So in the projects that I have been involved, and especially around Bristol, we went beyond smart. We don't use the word smart about our city and about our projects, and we have 2 new definitions. The one is a programmable city, and the second one is playable city. And we increasingly bring this programmable and playable together. And what it means that we care about efficiency and productivity, but cities are more. And it's about being livable, it's about being safe, and it's about actually being happy. We are the city that we have defined the Happy City Index, for instance, and in subsequent questions I could explain what it is. So what is our magic sauce? And it's not a specific one flavor of technology. As Julian says, cities are about technology convergence. It's the best example that you have to converge technology. So the 3 things that we are looking specifically is connectivity, is data, is content. So we talk about data, but what we consume mostly is content, is media. That's what we are consuming going around. So these 3 things. And when we are looking really at future city infrastructures, most of all, us still thinking quite traditionally. We're thinking about buildings, we're thinking about roads, train stations, ports, and airports, and so on. But actually connectivity and data, the urban data center, for instance, is going to be similar and equally becoming a more important part of the infrastructure. So in my part of the world, we are just about to embark in deploying new architecture for connectivity. You all heard about 5G, I'm sure you have. And what 5G brings is this, for the first time, this ability to really address densification. So the ability to connect people and the ability to connect things, and connect a lot of people and a lot of things in the same platform. So what we are looking is how you deliver services to people, but actually how these services are driven by data generated by things, and people are not things, that's for sure, but we need really this flavor of technology that actually differentiate, that enable people to actually empower people to deliver to people services driven by data generated by things. So what we are looking is what is the play of 5G and IoT in the future, not only for delivering an actual transformation in public services for cities, but also enabling individuals, enabling communities, and at the same time really enabling innovation and commercialization in cities.
Thanks, Dimitra. So connectivity, data, and content. The key issues out here. I'll first come to Lawrence because Suket has assured me that he has a contrarian view. So that would clearly segue into the challenges part of it. So Lawrence?
Yeah, so I'm a designer and I'm an entrepreneur, and I guess the way I look at cities is, cities are this new front line. It's where man has to live harmoniously with machines. We're programming autonomous cars so that in the future, the code developed by someone in California will decide whether I die in an eventuality of a crash or someone on the other side of the street crashes. And if there was a cow on one side of the road, am I more valuable than a cow? And how would that be different in India? And obviously the cow would always live first. And I think we're living in this world where we're going to see so much technology in our cities that will be sensor networks giving real-time information around how people are performing and all these connected devices. Now, the Internet of Things, I don't believe in it. The philosophy that we believe in is the Internet of Beings. The Internet of Beings is about people. We believe it's about the human, the physical, and the digital. We've successfully rolled this out into 42 countries so far, working in some of the, most fastest developing cities in the world. And how we've done that is, I'm an inventor. About 9 years ago, I was working at one of the largest energy companies in Europe. I tried to create a solution for improving cities, and I ran out of time. I couldn't make it work. But I kept thinking about this problem of energy and humans living in cities. And I came up with this idea that was a floor that could convert the weight of your footsteps into electricity and also data. And so the idea was that as people walk around a city, can we use this as a way to improve the experience and power parts of the cities itself? We went for a really exciting journey where we have 2,000 investors, raised several million pounds that allowed us to scale. And now today, if you go to the White House, we power all the lights outside the White House as people walk. The energy during the day is accumulated in batteries, and then it powers all the lights in the area. Now, people spend their entire lunch break jumping up and down on my floor, generating energy. And when I ask them, why are you doing that? They say, well, look, I'm finally doing something for my city. I'm part of my city. I feel like I'm part of a community. And I think that this community feeling people get really starts to enhance that experience. We've taken it to favelas in Brazil, and we use the energy of people playing sport. Every step they make, we convert their kinetic energy to electricity, and we power the lights in the favela community. So the power of sport turns the lights on and keeps it on. And then it also inspired all the children living in the favela to think differently about science and education and other core STEM subjects. So I think we created a huge change in the heart of a favela and then also in cities. And we've since taken this to Abu Dhabi Airport and a number of sites around the world. And just last week, we took it to the Intel headquarters in Bangalore, where people walk into the office, they're going to be jumping around on the floor, having fun, but then also powering part of the building itself. So, I think cities are about, again, playfulness, but we've got to find a balance between man and machine, and we aim to be this digital layer in future cities that connect people through the simple act of walking. And you might say, well, where's our market? Our market is every single floor in the world has a potential to start to connect people in a different way to cities in a friendly, fun, permission-based way. Thanks.
Thank you, Lawrence. Yeah, please. So I think you already got an applause out there, and I wish you could give this idea to parliamentarians, because I think there's a lot of stomping in the Houses of Parliament. So I think they could also generate some electricity for India. That would be a good idea. So, and also thanks for giving us that whole IOB versus IoT debate. So the Internet of Beings, which is something that even Matt was talking about some time while, where you have probably chips implanted, the matrix kind of stuff, and I don't know, futuristic scenario out there. But we'll come to that in a bit. Suket, for your contrarian view.
Hi. So we're here to discuss how technology impacts our work, our life, and our play. So this is not a shameful plug of who I am, but I will explain my worldview and why I have some of the views that I do. So we as a company do energy measurement, management, and conservation, and we provide technology to utilities, energy utilities, water utilities, health utilities. and also the users of these three utilities. So my controversial, almost controversial view is that I like Julian's model. You've got sensors and actuators, you've got connectivity, and then you've got data, analytics, intelligence, whatever you want to call it. My controversial view is this is not new. This has existed for donkey's years. It's existed since man went onto the moon. They had the Internet of Things. The reality is that it's just become so cheap. Computing has become so cheap that it is possible to build sensors. It is possible to build connectivity on things which it was not economic to do so previously. And I think as a consequence of that, we have ended up in a cul-de-sac. And the problem we've got is the problem of the 12 blind men, each feeling an elephant. And the guy who was the blind man who was at the trunk thought he had a snake. The guy who was at the tail thought he had a mouse. And that's what all these big names, the Internet of Things, blockchain, artificial intelligence, big data, cloud has become. It's become the elephant in the blind men. Actually, what we need to do is operationalize these things. And a lot of people like to use a lot of technology, but it becomes technology for the sake of using technology. I think if we start from this backwards, if we go to our customers, we figure out the problems that they've got and what are the problems that they're trying to solve. And we work back from that problem to the technology that they need in order to address that problem. I think bit by bit, we'll be able to deliver adoption. I'll give you an example of ERP systems. Again, not related to any of this, but ERP systems have existed for donkey's years. But ERP systems have remained the remit of medium and large enterprises. Small enterprises are very, very afraid of using ERP systems. At best, they use financial modules because they believe that it is an overhead. They don't understand that the benefits that they could possibly drive, and they believe that this is something which only big businesses need to do. The reality is nobody's been able to implement ERP systems at very, very low costs for very small businesses. But if you could do that, that would be a fantastic way of actually giving that small business a platform to carry on a growth journey. And similarly with all of these technological problems, I think whether it be a small business, it could be a pub, or it could be a halwai ka dukaan in Delhi, you've got to go in and you've got to find the problem, the small problem, the first problem that you fix, and you give them what we call a staircase of trust journey, because you build this very, very slowly. Because I completely agree. I think there is a darkness looming around the digital age. There is a huge insecurity around the use of data. We find that with our customers. When we go out, our customers say to us, wow, this is fantastic. But actually, I don't want to deploy it because my boss will say to me, why didn't you do this before? Secure has come in and given you a 5-10% energy saving, but it's not rocket science. You could have done this before. It is insecurity at that level that we need to address. And if we do that slowly, then we'll be able to achieve a deep adoption, and we'll be able to cross the chasm in the workspace and to some degree in the live space. Because the ultimate challenge is being able to cross the chasm and get to adoption on the innovation curve. Okay. So that's my controversial view, Leslie.
So I think basically you're saying that, okay, this is old wine in new bottle with a more nuanced kind of stuff, more mature kind of technologies, and perhaps in some cases, of course, the whole question of like blockchain, it's often said as a parody or spoofing about it, saying that it's a solution chasing a problem. But of course, we do have these kind of contrarian views out here. Not everybody on the panel might agree with this. But very quickly, Lawrence, let me start with you. If you can say a couple of challenges in the light of what we had said, because in the interest of time, we'll have to make it two. So 2 challenges that you see immediately and how you can address them, as far as the big picture is concerned.
So I think the first thing is you've got to find your product market fit, and a solution can have so many different layers of solution. Maybe one to make the government happy, maybe one to make the company happy, and then one to make the individual happy. And I think the thing we've done is, I guess, we found a way that we can gamify the experience of being in a city. When you walk over our floor, you get rewarded. You get rewarded in some of those popular apps in the world. It pops up, and I can give you, for example, in the future, a discount on your healthcare. because you're staying fit and healthy. So I think the challenge is finding a product market fit for some of these early visionary things. Blockchain, is no way ready yet for many of the applications unless you did it from the kind of a bottom-up approach. I think the second thing is, I spend 6 months of my life on a plane. We're in 42 countries. We're speaking to people who are building new cities in the desert from scratch. And we're speaking to people who've got legacy cities with 400 years of engineering behind it. London sitting there, and they're trying to make it smart and change it for the better. And I think the biggest challenge we see is longevity of government policy is almost the biggest barrier we find, almost to a point where you can have a sales cycle that takes a decade. And I think that's really hard for innovators, disruptors, like myself, to build a really sustainable business model around it. So I think there needs to be more of a hybrid approach that brings business and other stakeholders in that allows people to scale in these new markets as well.
Okay. Suket, very quickly, one challenge. I'm going to reduce the time as we go.
I think the core challenge is finding the problem to solve in our area, and then solving it in a constructive, easy fashion.
Fair enough. Dimitra, one core challenge, and how would you address it?
One core challenge. Technology is going to come. There's no way. I mean, when we're talking about 5G and IoT is going to transform our cities. Demonstrate early on, the challenge is demonstrate early on that actually this technology can improve service delivery for the citizens. How, for instance, we are linking different services together, how we are linking social care with transport or clean air with transport and so on. So improve service delivery via technology in order to actually gain confidence of citizens. And just if I want to add one more,
We'll have to make it very quick.
Very quickly, can we start actually promoting human intelligence instead of artificial intelligence? That is a big challenge forward, and we really have to take this challenge.
So that you don't have smart cities with dumb people.
Yeah, and that's the most important thing, is the smart part of the city is us. This is a prototype that we've been deploying around the streets of Dharavi in Mumbai. And what it does is to try to map together artificial intelligence with human answers, because try talking to a machine and then talk to your loved ones. There is a difference. And the other challenge I would say is you're all looking down at your phone still, by the way. I can see you. Shame on you. And the problem is these devices are not of us. They are hard, they are cold, they are dead. Touch your clothes, touch the things around you. They are alive. So the other challenge for technology is to bring new materials, new ways of touching and sensing the world that are very human.
So I would say the big challenge for us is, in the context of all this technology, is how do we reimagine development of society, and in particular look at education. How do we reimagine education away from knowledge-based? All of education has been assembling facts and learning stuff, and it's not going to be that in the future. It's going to be how do you build soft skills? How do you build the human skills that we've heard about? And how do you make those things that everybody can participate in, so you take everybody with you? And nobody's really doing this yet. Every education system, every society throughout the world has got to think about how is society going to look like in the future, and how do we need to empower people as they grow up and as they get older to deal with that.
So in all fairness, now we have heard the kind of challenges, how they're going to address it. I can take one quick question from the audience. One very quick question. No observations. I see a lot of people have questions, sir.
Thank you. The question is, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So the question is technology and how it can help solve public problems, public system problems. So we are sitting in a country where less than 10% of clean water is provided, healthcare similarly, air pollution. So I want to ask the panel, which is a great panel, to ask how would technology, when can it be deployed to solve some of the public system problems?
Wow, okay.
My very quick answer to that is make sure you involve people, be human-centered in your approach. In the UK, we've had billions and billions and billions of investment into all sorts of digital computer systems, and they, to a large extent, have failed. And there are many reasons for that, but one is the people who have to live and work and play around these systems are asked at the very last minute about what they want out of the system. So involve the community.
Leslie, can I have a quick? So we've done a lot of work in this area, and I think the problems in the West are very different to the problems that we have. We have to wake up and smell the coffee. Our resources are limited compared to the population that we've got. So first and foremost, I would say that the first thing we got to do is use common sense in order to control the scarce resource, and in order to ensure that we use the data, the sensors, to minimize the waste of that scarce resource. I think that in India is the first problem to solve in water, energy, all of those essential utilities.
So my request is that we can take some of these things offline, because it's going to be, this is a very broad question which I realized even when he was asking it. So I would rather request, in the interest of time, why don't we wake up, smell the coffee, and perhaps stomp our feet as he suggested. We might generate electricity in the bargain. So please give all the panelists a very big hand. Thank you very much.
Very good. Right, we are going to now have a seamless and lightning speed transition to the next key session, which is one that we should be incredibly proud of. It's the launch of the UK-India Healthcare Artificial Intelligence Catalyst. Can I invite very quickly to the stage Sir Malcolm Grant, the Chairman of the NHS, former Chairman of NHS England, Crispin Simon, Her Majesty's Trade Commissioner for South Asia, Anna Roy, Advisor at Niti Aayog, and Madhu Bose, who works on digital healthcare at the Department of International Trade, for the launch of the Healthcare AI Catalyst.
Thank you very much, Amo, and wonderful technology panelists. It was great to have you on the stage. And look forward to seeing you outside later. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session to launch the UK-India Healthcare Artificial Intelligence Catalyst. It is a very exciting project. It's part of the technology partnership launched by Prime Ministers May and Modi during Prime Minister Modi's visit to London in April of this year. Why artificial intelligence in healthcare? For two reasons. Firstly, patients. We will hear later what the companies that have been selected for this project can contribute. But suffice it to say that early diagnosis in the field of cancer is extraordinarily important. One of the companies that is on the shortlist is operating in the field of lung cancer. And 85% of lung cancers are diagnosed at stage 3 and 4, at which there is no effective treatment at present. So it is all very well developing therapies, but if you're not getting the early diagnosis, the therapies cannot work. And cost is another important factor in artificial intelligence in healthcare as well. Accenture have estimated that the US alone could save $150 billion in healthcare systems if it were to comprehensively adopt artificial intelligence. So that's why AI. I think that is pretty clear. Why does it fit within the technology partnership between our two countries? I think that's equally clear. Firstly, India has a wealth of developers and digital healthcare specialists, and it has the ambition of the landmark healthcare reform program that the government has launched, Ayushman Bharat. And Amitabh Kant earlier, for those who were in the opening session, described very passionately that program, and I am delighted that Anna Roy will be able to describe that for us later. That and the hashtag AI for All program specifically within the Government of India's healthcare program. And the same arguments apply in the UK. We have the same challenges in terms of clinical performance and cost. We also feel we have world-class research organizations, and in artificial intelligence, we know that we have leading global organizations at Imperial College, the Royal Free, UCL, and the Alan Turing Institute. All of them are working with Google DeepMind, and respectively in the fields of breast cancer diagnosis, acute kidney injury, head and neck radiotherapy planning, and in the case of the Alan Turing Institute, eye disease, where that collaboration led to a publication in Nature earlier this year, the absolute gold standard in the field of biomedical research. So this is front and center and at the leading edge, which is what we want from the technology partnership and from today's events. The NHS also, as an integrated healthcare system, can combine diagnostic images, and the East Midlands group alone has 1.6 billion usable images when several million is adequate for statistical significance. So we believe that we can bring much to this partnership. In practice, how does it work? The British government is contributing £1 million for the Healthcare AI Catalyst over a multi-year program, aiming to bring our strongest companies to India to be deployed in a pilot program initially in India government hospitals and in primary healthcare centers, focusing particularly in diagnostic artificial intelligence amongst the really big disease groups. And the knowledge and experience that is learned there in diabetic retinopathy and cancer, diabetes are obviously wholly relevant back to the benefit of the UK patients and the NHS. And we will be able to work alongside, those companies will work alongside impressive companies in India who are already active in artificial intelligence, Cure AI, Sigtuple and Nirami, amongst many others. So today, we're launching the first phase of this program. We're going to announce 5 company shortlist that have been shortlisted by a panel of UK experts. We'll hear more from Anna about Niti Aayog's process. They are putting together a specially assembled clinical program to work out what is the very best fit for the needs of Indian patients and the Indian healthcare system. And they, Niti Aayog, will confirm the selection of the companies to take forward in a few weeks' time. But before my colleague Madhuka announces that shortlist, I am delighted to be able to introduce Anna Roy, who will say a few words about Niti Aayog's important contribution to this important program. Thank you. Anna.
Thank you. It's good afternoon. No, it's still good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me here, and I'm very excited with this launch because this particular initiative really covers two major issues, which two major cornerstones of our strategy, which was launched earlier this year. The first one is AI for all, as it was mentioned, where we are really covering the fact that we want to use this technology for highest impact, and that is why we have named the strategy AI for all. And the second is collaboration, which is the second cornerstone of our strategy. And we are promoting collaboration amongst governments, academia, industry, and in that regard, I think we have really made very good progress since the agreement was signed in the presence of the two leaders. Coming to the particular initiative, we have gone through a long process on the UK side as well as on Niti Aayog side. I have, seen that development of technology is far easier a job than the adoption and implementation on the ground, especially in a technology like AI. So in here we have been trying to have a structure which addresses various implementation bottlenecks, which also gets all the stakeholders at one place, so we are able to address their concerns, especially because health being such a sensitive sector, we do not want to launch on something in a hurry and then kind of repent in leisure. We have now these 5 shortlisted, which would be named soon. For these, we will have a panel of experts who will vet them, because the models, etc., the validation for the Indian scenario, we do not, Niti would not like to do it without getting the experts in place. So we will have an expert panel in India who will vet these shortlisted and then select the ones which can be picked up for phase 1. So phase 1, I think, will really be the learning experience, where we put in place a structure which can then be used for all future such initiatives in the sector. And I feel just the first stage will be the initial bit, which will be having some teething problem, and if we are able to get that right, all subsequent ones, we hope we will be able to get more companies to India to kind of help us with meeting our health challenges. The second thing which we have done is to already be in touch with state governments, because it is to be implemented at the ground level, and I'm very happy to announce that from 2 very advanced state governments, I would not like to name them right now because formal approvals are still awaited, but in my conversation they have been very positive, and they are already working in getting the necessary approval. So everything is now kind of dependent on the expert panel kind of saying the yes, and go ahead will then be given, and states we have already mobilized. So I would say we are at a very advanced stage, and as you mentioned, in a couple of weeks time we should be ready to go on the ground with this launch. And I think this project will really address, in the previous panel somebody asked how AI can help in addressing social problems, and I think this project is the wonderful example which shows how AI can be used in addressing some of the social sector issues which this country has faced for very long, whether it is distance, availability of personnel, or any of the other things, availability of resources. So I think AI is the best technology till date, which really is poised to help us address some of our very basic problems. So I wish the team all the best and look forward to working with you all in the launch of this very important program. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Crispin, Anna, thank you for your remarks. Having been involved with this project from its very inception, it gives me great pleasure here today to stand here and announce the 5 companies that have been shortlisted through a competition that we ran in the UK back in October. So I feel like a bit of an Oscar presenter saying, and the nominees are, and so the nominees are. The first one, in no particular order, is Elsevier, or Relics, part of the Relics group. Elsevier's track record in the UK has been outstanding through their Arezzo Pathways technology. They've been part of the digital solutions both in England and Scotland, where they effectively digitize treatment guidelines, such as the National Treatment Guidelines in India, to create a knowledge repository on which their AI engine can effectively help healthcare professionals deal with patients in the field to understand what their treatment and management should be based on those treatment guidelines. When you consider the shortage of healthcare professionals in India, with over 50% of roles in primary care being unfilled, up to 70% in some cases, then this solution would be really one to address those gaps. We then have Optellum. I think Crispin referred to them earlier. They are world leaders in using and analyzing radiology images to diagnose lung cancer. Crispin mentioned the fact that 85% of lung cancers are detected in stage 3 and 4, which effectively really limit treatment options, but also make it really expensive. And for certain strata in the society today, that means they're in a very difficult position. So Optellum work with the Oxford University Hospitals. They recently won a £17.5 million grant as part of a consortium of 15 NHS trusts to effectively re-engineer the way cancer is treated and monitored in the UK. So they're part of the future of cancer care in the UK, and we hope that they will make an impact here in India as well. The next is Visualytics, who analyze OCT images, optical coherence tomography images, to diagnose glaucoma, diabetic retinopathy, and age-related macular degeneration. When you look at diabetes, you have about 75 million diabetes cases in India, of which a third have diabetic retinopathy, and half of those are undiagnosed. So when you consider that disease burden, a solution like Visualytics, which will allow handheld cameras in the field to take photographs, upload them to the cloud, and return a diagnosis in about 10 to 20 seconds, that seems like a pretty effective tool to address this disease burden. The next, just to say that Visualytics had earlier been introduced to Prime Minister Modi and May when they visited the UK as part of the launch of the initiative. We then have tumor trace, from lung cancer, which Optellum was covering, to cervical cancer, which also has a massive disease burden in India. When you consider that a quarter of all the cervical cancer deaths worldwide come from India, they are looking at providing a solution that is low cost, highly accurate, 95% accurate, using a combination of quantum mechanics and artificial intelligence. So highly innovative, and they're using that combination to achieve about 95% accuracy of diagnosing cervical cancer in the field using traditional pap smear slides. They've got a solution that both works at point of contact, but also at laboratories where you have a large sample of healthcare, of slides, which are unused. We then have, last but not the least, Your.MD, which again goes back to the primary care space. Their app-based solutions, the mobile-based solution, supports the identification of prevention, treatment, self-care, and management for patients, and aims to provide the likes of ASHA workers in the field with a mobile solution that again is based on best practice content from the British Medical Journal, and allows that to be used in the management and addressing of the needs of those patients at a primary care level. So those are our 5 nominees. Anna mentioned earlier that the next step is to go from that nominee list to a selected list. And once that happens, we will be ready to go on the ground and launch the pilots in their true context. So thank you very much for the opportunity to introduce the companies. I'd like to invite Sir Malcolm to come and give us closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Maddie, and it's an enormous pleasure to be here as the recently expired chairman of NHS England to just say a few words about where we in the UK see artificial intelligence taking us in healthcare. I think this collaboration is potentially of enormous value, and it's not just for the 5 collaborations that have so far been shortlisted, but for everything else that will flow from this. Because make no mistake about it, the future of healthcare is going to be fundamentally changed by data and by the intelligent tools we use to interpret those data. And artificial intelligence is the device that will spread across all of the data that we presently have and the data that we will in future generate and help us to bring new results and improvements to patients. So let me just, if I may, speculate on where AI may yet take us in relation to healthcare. We can tell from the 5 examples that Maddie's just outlined that early diagnosis is a key point. In particular, in many cancers, the damage that is caused to mortality and morbidity is a consequence of late presentation. And late presentation is often a consequence of asymptomatic growth of cancer tumors in the body before the patient is aware and reports them. So if we have models of screening that are accurate and that allow us to intervene at an earlier stage so that we can hugely improve diagnosis, then that's stage 1. I think stage 2, again, it comes through in some of these 5 examples, is prediction. How can we use data to predict the progression of ill health in a patient and to track that ill health even before it's symptomatic, and allow a healthcare system to intervene at an earlier stage rather than as a default, which at presently is across the world, a very expensive default where we fix and repair once stuff has gone wrong. So I think diagnosis and prediction are the starting points, and they then move into prevention. How far can we use data and artificial intelligence to prevent ill health occurring in the first place? But I want to put down 2 or 3 markers. We are at a very early stage in AI. We're still in the foothills. I have no limit to my enthusiasm and my support for the growth of AI in healthcare, because I do believe that it can help us to cut out rampant inefficiencies in the system. It can help us to be much more accurate in diagnosis and prediction, and it can significantly reduce cost. But there is a tension here between the aspirations of a drive towards entrepreneurialism and innovation and change on the one hand, which has brought us across the whole of the technology industry enormous changes in relation to mobile technologies and shortly, I think, autonomous vehicles. But in healthcare, it's different. In healthcare, we run up against the fact that although mistakes may be acceptable in designing a new iPhone, in healthcare, mistakes are not acceptable. In healthcare, mistakes can lead to injury and to death. And there's a conflict here which is most vividly expressed in a recent book around the experience with a company called Theranos in the United States, run by Elizabeth Holmes. The book's called Bad Blood. I commend it to everybody because it's a case study of what happens when entrepreneurial enthusiasm, secrecy, closed laboratories, non-disclosure agreements, and the advance of technology on the one hand come up against regulation in the public interest to secure safety across the piece. And so I would add on the back of this that the essence of AI's advance in healthcare has to be around absolutely outstanding science. It has to be around publication of results. It has to be around using publicly available data. It has to be around not having a black box with AI going on in an invisible way. We have to be able all the time to have those fundamental qualities of modern science: communication, openness, and replicability. And then we have a greater chance of ensuring safety across the piece. So that's why within the NHS, we are pushing AI very hard, whilst at the same time trying to ensure that we engage with our top universities, as Crispin said, to ensure that we have the highest standards of scientific and technical input to it. And there we can see the huge advantages of a collaboration with India. On the one hand, in the United Kingdom, using AI in a well-developed and mature healthcare system where it will become, I could foresee, a substitution for what we're currently doing in many respects. And in India, it becomes a supplement. It becomes an addition. And it's going to enable, I think, India to drive out a healthcare system which will be cheaper, effective, and accurate. And that's why these 2 countries need to work together, because there's a huge amount of exchange of intelligence and of experience that we can foster. So may I thank you again, Anna, for the support that Niti Aayog is giving to this program, and to thank you, Crispin, and to thank you, Maddie, for these presentations today. Thank you very much.